Welcome, and thank you for joining Columbia Housing in our virtual presentation and public meeting on the development plans for the Oaks at St. Anna's Park, formerly known as Gonzales Gardens. I am Ivory Mathews, the Interim Executive Director for Columbia Housing. Before we begin our virtual presentation, I invite all of you to stay tuned until the end of the presentation for a live question and answer session on Facebook and Zoom. I'm going to start off the presentation by giving you guys a historical perspective of Gonzales Gardens. Gonzales Gardens was built in 1939. It was our very first public housing development, and it was built to house white families only. It was occupied in September of 1940 with 236 initial units and 44 additional units added in 1942 for a total of 280 units. Gonzales Garden was named after the Gonzales brothers, son of Cuban immigrants. The Gonzales brothers founded the State Publishing Company, several newspapers throughout South Carolina, including Greenville News, the Charleston News and Courier, and the State newspaper. Gonzales Garden was home to many notables, returning World War II veterans, and families of color following the Fair Housing Act of 1968. Archbishop Joseph Cardinal Bernardine of Chicago's Catholic Archdiocese, basketball star Tyrone Corbin, NBA former player and coach, and it was an active community for hundreds of Columbia families for over 7 decades. Next, I'm going to be turning over the presentation to Cindi Herrera. She's our Senior Vice President of Development.
Good afternoon. After 74 years and continued reduction in federal funding to support public housing, conditions at Gonzales Gardens had deteriorated beyond repair. And in December of 2015, Columbia Housing received approval from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to demolish Gonzales Gardens and replace it with a new community. Important as we develop the new community is to honor the history of the past. And so we're working in partnership with Historic Columbia and the South Carolina Historic Preservation Office. In order to honor the history of Gonzales Gardens and Allen Benedict Court, we're going to establish a walking trail that will connect the two communities. In addition to that, we have a designated history page on our website that has a lot of information related to historic preservation, including narrative reports, photos of the original site, building plans, oral histories, and other information that tells the story of Gonzales Gardens and the families that live there. In addition, we will be identifying certain locations along this path in which we will place historical markers in areas of significance. There will also be a historical marker at the entrance of Gonzales Gardens that recognizes its history in the community. We're working to develop an app that's going to guide the walking tour and provide digital historical exhibits. We've executed a memorandum of agreement with the State Historic Preservation Office and with HUD that basically is going to guide all of the historical preservation efforts that we'll put forth as we honor Gonzales Gardens. In developing the Oaks at St. Anna's Park, we followed some basic planning and design principles. The first of those is community engagement. Today, we're very excited to be engaging the residents, the neighbors, leaders, and community stakeholders in the planning process in order to design change. The second principle is diversity. We want to ensure that we develop a broad range of housing options that are going to bring people of diverse ages, race, and income into daily interaction, strengthening the personal and civic bonds to truly create a sense of community. Our third principle is that of neighborhood. We want to assure that the design of the new development is integrated into the existing neighborhood design, and it does not take the form of an isolated project. Community space. It's important to connect the new development with existing public and community spaces to provide opportunities for recreational and civic engagement. We're very excited to connect this community with the beautiful St. Anna's Park. Architectural character. We want to make sure that our new development responds to the best traditions of the residential architecture that's existing in the Lion Street community. And finally, economic opportunity. New development is going to provide economic business opportunities for local and minority businesses. This slide gives a presentation of the new site. I'd like to just quickly highlight the primary streets that connect the site. The site runs along Forest Drive. To the top of the screen, you'll see Forest Drive listed there, and you'll see the units that are going to run along Forest Drive. To the left of the screen is Ontario Street, and you'll see where our senior building will be located. To the bottom of the screen are three streets, Washington Street, and you'll see Lion Street, which intersects with Washington. And then very exciting is Liberty Hill Avenue, which is going to cross Washington Street now and enter into the new development in order to be able to provide additional traffic flow. And to the right of the screen is McDuffie Street. So this just gives an overall layout of what the new site design will look like in the new community. The new community consists of two components. The first is Oak Terrace Senior Housing. You can see to the left of the screen is a layout of how the senior building will be located on the site. It will be accessed off of Ontario Street. You'll see the parking behind the building, but this building is going to anchor the very important and visible corner of Forest Drive and Ontario Street. You can see on the lower right portion of the slide a conceptual design of what you will see as you're driving down Forest Drive as you see the new Oak Terrace Senior Housing. The senior housing is going to consist of 95 one-bedroom apartments. They're very spacious apartments with 784 square feet. They include a dining room, kitchen, living room, and a sunroom, a bedroom, a large bathroom, and a washer and a dryer or laundry room. The amenities included in the unit will be all the appliances, including dishwasher, microwave, and the washer and dryer. The building will also have a community center with a community kitchen, a computer lab, a fitness center, and there'll be an on-site management office. The second component of the Oaks at St. Anna's Park is Oak Park Family Housing. You can see the layout of the family housing. It's in townhome design. Each of the townhomes are designed to be able to face the inner community and the parking that will be provided for the families. Every unit will have an individual entrance, so it will present and provide residents with a sense of privacy and ownership in their individual unit. The family housing will be a total of 190 units. As I mentioned, they'll all be townhome style units. There will be 2-bedroom units consisting of 1,017 square feet and 3-bedroom units with 1,167 square feet. These units will also have all of the modern appliances, including dishwasher, microwave, and an in-unit washer and dryer. The family development will also have a community building. The community building will house a very large multi-purpose room and a community kitchen and a computer center, as well as the management and leasing offices. As part of our design, we will be doing a partial closure of the existing Lion Street. As you can see on the right-hand side, our new senior building that will anchor the corner of Forest Drive. It is on the other side of Lion Street. This land was purchased by the Housing Authority, and it will be necessary to do a partial closure in order to be able to incorporate that into the development. Down to the bottom of the senior building is a large detention pond, and that detention pond is going to assure that we have proper drainage and proper runoff of all stormwater and not have any negative impacts in the neighborhood with the redevelopment of the site. In order to accommodate the closure, we've developed a cul-de-sac so that people coming down Lion Street will be able to turn around and easily exit the Lion Street portion that will remain open. On the left-hand side of the screen, we've marked the green portion is that portion of Lion Street that will be closing, and then you'll see the small blue half circle, which is the part of the cul-de-sac that will be incorporated. And you can see the full cul-de-sac on the right-hand side of the slide. I want to bring us back to the site plan again, now that we've looked at the different components, so you can see that how all of them are integrated into this site. And again, you'll see the closure of Lion Street, and you'll see the access to the senior building off of Ontario Street. Ontario Street will serve as access to Forest Drive. And as I mentioned previously, very important is that we've extended Liberty Hill Avenue. Liberty Hill Avenue currently ends on Washington Street, but we'll be extending that as a result of previous engagement with the neighborhood. We're extending Liberty Hill Avenue into the community. There'll be a traffic circle in the middle, and you'll be able to exit to the right and be able to exit the community through Garden Place, which goes out to Forest Drive, or down to McDuffie. The reason for doing this is to be able to eliminate some of the traffic on McDuffie Street. Right now, McDuffie Street is the only street that runs from Forest Drive through to Gervais Street. So we've built this additional path of traffic in order to reduce some of the traffic that currently runs up and down McDuffie Street. This chart shows us a summary of the units on the property. And as you can see, as I mentioned, there are 95 one-bedroom units in the senior housing. And those units are all 50% AMI. They will serve people at 50% of AMI, and they will provide rental assistance to all of the seniors on the property. The family units are broken out by the 2 and 3 bedrooms, and they will serve a range of income levels. In the 2 bedrooms, we have a total of 107 2 bedrooms. 11 of those units will serve market rate renters with no restrictions. 8 of the units will serve individuals at 60% of AMI, but there'll be no rental assistance. And then 83 units will have rental assistance and serve individuals at 50% of the area median income. The 3-bedroom units, there's a total of 83 3-bedroom units. Again, there will be 8 of those at market rate with no rent restrictions and no income limits. There will be 11 units that will be limited to 60% of AMI, but with no rental assistance. And the balance of 69 units will have rental assistance available. So if we summarize the townhome units for families, 10% of the units will be unrestricted market rate units. 10% of the units will be 60% of AMI, but with no rental assistance. And the remaining 80% of the units will have rental assistance available to assure that we can reach the low and moderate income families in our community. This project will be financed strictly with private capital. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development no longer provides any funding for the redevelopment of affordable or public housing. Columbia Housing does not have funding sources to do new development. So as a result, we will use simply private capital. That private capital will come from a multiple of sources. The first will be multifamily housing revenue bonds that will be issued by Columbia Housing. With those revenue bonds, we will access federal low-income housing tax credits, which will provide equity. And very exciting, we will be able to access for the first time the state of South Carolina's low-income housing tax credit. This is a new tax credit which was just passed by our state legislature this year. So we're very excited to have this additional tool to help finance affordable housing. The permanent mortgage will be an FHA mortgage. We will also receive a small grant from the South Carolina Department of Mental Health, and we will be receiving infrastructure funding from the City of Columbia. And looking at the amount of the development, this is a development with significant economic impact into our community. The overall development will consist of $58.2 million. We've broken it out by the family and the senior housing. The first column is the family housing. The second column is the senior housing. As you can see, it gives you the amount. $32 million will be our FHA mortgage. $18.8 million will be our federal tax credit. And again, very exciting that we'll be able to raise $3.9 million with state tax credits, a small grant of $500,000 from the Department of Mental Health, and $2.5 million will be our request from the City of Columbia to assist with infrastructure. The overall cost to develop the project is $42.8 million for hard construction cost and $15.4 million, which will be our soft cost. I'm happy to turn it back over to Executive Director, Ms. Ivory Mathews.
So thank you, Cindi, for providing the update on the Oaks at St. Anna's Park. Columbia Housing is very excited about the development of the Oaks at St. Anna's Park. We're excited not only because it creates more affordable housing units for our community, but it also creates economic opportunities as well. So Columbia Housing has set aside a minimum requirement for minority, women-owned, and small business entities. So we've set aside 30% of the total estimated cost of construction, which is $12.8 million, dedicated towards minorities, women-owned businesses, and small businesses, and also for Section 3 new hires of low-income residents of our community. The Section 3 requirements include former residents of Gonzales Gardens, current residents of other Columbia Housing communities, current participants of Columbia Housing's Housing Choice Voucher Program, other qualifying residents of the City of Columbia, and we also have a goal to hire 20 new employees in the Old St. Anna's Park. So the Old St. Anna's Park, to do a development like this requires a lot of partnerships, a lot of public and private partnerships. So we want to take this opportunity to thank many of our partners, the South Carolina Department of Mental Health, the South Carolina Housing Finance Agency, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, Mungo Homes, Davis Architecture, Nix Defco, the City of Columbia, Cox and Deacons, and last but certainly not least, the Lion Street Neighborhood Association. The timeline for the development of the Oaks at St. Anna's Park is listed on the slide that you see in front of you. This timeline is also included on our Housing Authority's website, and we will be updating this timeline as milestones may change. The first key milestone that we have is to finalize the redesign for the St. Anna's Park, and that is an estimated completion date of June 30th. Stakeholder engagement is an ongoing process. We have city approvals that we've estimated to complete on July 31st. Our financing applications, we intend to have those all submitted by August 31st. Final construction docs on September 30th. We anticipate receiving all of our financing approvals by mid-November, with a financial closing in January of 2021, an anticipated construction start date of February the 15th of 2021, with a construction completion date of September 30th, 2022, and an occupancy date of June 30th, 2023. We want to thank you all for taking the time to participate in our virtual public meeting. Now we will open up the session for a live Q&A.
Hi, welcome. And I'm Cynthia Hardy over here at Columbia Housing. Seated beside me is Ivory Mathews, our Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer. And besides Mrs. Mathews is Cindi Herrera, our Senior Vice President of Development. First of all, on behalf of these ladies and the entire board and staff team here at Columbia Housing, please accept our sincere apologies for the technical difficulties. We have been having some internet issues, and because of that, we restarted our presentation because we want each and every one of you to have an opportunity to see and hear everything, and also have an opportunity to ask our questions, ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We also want to let you know on our website, if you go to that website, and under the Gonzales Gardens tab, you'll be able to find our presentation that might help as we begin to ask our questions this evening. I also want to make mention of the fact that a recording of this presentation plus the Q&A will be available to you on our website and on our Facebook page immediately following this presentation. Mrs. Mathews, I want to say a very special congratulations to you. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to publicly address you as the new Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of Columbia Housing, so congratulations.
Thank you, Cynthia. I too, again, want to send a sincere apology to all of you who have so patiently waited for us to air live today. As most of you know, a lot of us are really depending a lot on internet connection, and we've had some technical difficulties today, but we know that you know, you guys have been there and waiting patiently for us to air live, so we wanted to go ahead and make sure we do that today. So thank you.
Ms. Matthews, we have a couple of questions that have come in. Some of them are unrelated to Allen Benedict Court or to Gonzales Gardens. Would you like to go ahead and take those questions now?
Certainly.
Well, Retina Adams is asking, when will public housing be ready to place those on the public housing list, the public housing waiting list, not the Section 8 waiting list, because she and her mom have been waiting on that waiting list. And I do have to say that, it can be frustrating for people because affordable housing, there's just not enough of it in our market.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Adams, for asking us that question. We currently have a portfolio of about 1,600 public housing units, and whenever we have any vacancies in our public housing portfolio, we pull individuals off of our waiting list and offer them opportunities for the vacant units that we currently have. Unfortunately, we just don't have enough public housing units available to house all of the families that certainly have the needs for affordable housing. And our turnover rate in terms of vacancies, we typically have about 98% occupancy rate on average. So we have very few units that actually turn over, and so we're pulling less and less people off of the waiting list and offering them an opportunity to housing.
I do understand. Ms. Herrera, that's probably the root of why we're looking at what we're doing at Gonzales, the old Gonzales Gardens site, the fact that affordable housing and the void of affordable housing in so many of our cities across the country is one that's heartfelt throughout the area, but at this particular time in our area, we are trying to do something about it.
Absolutely. The goal is to be able to replace any hard housing units that have been lost or that will be lost in the future because of their long-term useful life has expired. And so we will continue to work diligently to assure that we can replace any affordable hard units that we lose in the community.
Ms. Herrera, what are some of the big takeaways from the presentation today with regards to the old Gonzales Gardens site?
I think two things that are very critical. Number one is we're bringing back some significant senior housing. We have found that as our population continues to age, there is a tremendous demand for affordable senior housing in the community, which is why we've added the very exciting senior component. And then I think the other component is that it's a very different type of design. We wanted to make sure that this development will fit in and be compatible with the neighborhood. And we've gone to a townhome design versus an apartment design. And so that provides something that's a little bit more towards the single family type of design. Everybody will have their own space, their own entrances, their own exits, and it gives everybody a little bit stronger sense of home.
I want to let all of our viewers know that if they'd like to get a copy of this presentation, that they can go ahead and go to columbiahousingsc.org, and that's /Gonzales-Gardens. I want you all to have the presentation because if you can follow along with some of the questions that we'll be asking Ms. Herrera, it might spawn some additional questions in your head as well. When we look at the layout and the design of the new Gonzales Gardens site, Ms. Mathews, would you like to indicate anything before I ask specific questions to Ms. Herrera about why certain components of the project are what they are?
Certainly. Anytime we take a look at our layout and design of our property, we really take into consideration just a lot of the feedback that we receive from the neighborhood association, and the Lion Street Neighborhood Association certainly has been a very strong partner in providing us that feedback. And so we want to make sure that we incorporate those ideas into the neighborhood design, because we want to make sure that whatever we're building going forward, that it does create a sense of community and it fits aesthetically into every community that we work in. So I'll turn it over to Cindi.
Did you have I think that, again, I had stressed the feedback that we had gotten from the Lion Street Neighborhood Association in previous engagement led to the the design of Liberty Hill Avenue. It was very important to the residents to find a mechanism to flow traffic through the development and take a little bit of relief off of McDuffie Street.
Okay.
And so that certainly was a feedback directly from the community. The switching from an apartment, a 3-story walk-up apartment type of design to a townhome design was also based on feedback from the community. And then the basic orientation of the buildings is also based on feedback that we've received from the neighborhood association. And we're still hoping to get some additional feedback before any final decision is made. Each of the buildings has been looked at to determine the best orientation for each of those buildings.
I see. And when you say each of the building has been looked at by developers, by planners?
It's our development team as well as the neighborhood association and the staff at the city.
Gotcha.
We've taken feedback from all of them and are still looking at the final orientation for each of those buildings.
Dean Slade wants to know what direction will Dean is asking, which direction will the homes on Forest Drive face? He's also asking, will there be fences? What do we anticipate as rental costs for units with and without a subsidy? So I'm going to take them one at a time.
Okay.
Okay. So Cindi, Dean is asking, what directions will the homes on Forest Drive face?
Currently, we have them facing inward so that the front door would be where the parking is. So you would be able to park at your front door. We have received feedback regarding reversing the orientation of those buildings. We have not made a final determination on the best way to lay those buildings. We've received feedback from some people, and actually at the last neighborhood association meeting, we actually had a divided group as to which way people would like to see those buildings face. As far as what will be along the street level of Forest Drive, our goal is to have a highly landscaped buffer. Number one, to help obviously reduce some of the noise. That's a pretty busy street. We want to make sure that the residents enjoy peaceful, quiet enjoyment of their units. And we're also looking at the possibility of trying to have a decorative fencing that would be similar to what you see across the street with the hospital.
Okay.
So those are some of the options that we're currently looking at, and those are some of the details yet to finalize as we continue to get stakeholder input.
Well, Dean has a couple more questions, and I'm going to ask them, then I'll skip, and then I'll come back to Dean, okay? Dean also wants to know, what do we anticipate the rental costs for units to be with and without subsidy?
Well, all of the contract unit cost will be the same. They're based on market cost, and they will range from about $900 for a 1-bedroom to about $1,300 for a 3-bedroom. The units that have rental assistance, residents will pay 30% of their income towards the rent, and then the rental assistance will assist with the balance of the rent payments. The units that are restricted under the low-income housing tax credits, those rents will be a little bit lower, and then obviously the market rate rents will be at the amount that I indicated, between $900 and $1,300 based on bedroom size.
So Cindi, let's go back and then just underscore that and bold out a little bit something. So this is a mixed income neighborhood.
That is correct.
Talk to us about why that is and what that is.
Well, mixed income neighborhood basically means that you serve different levels of income. And I think experience has found throughout the affordable housing world that when you have a mixed income community, you have more of a traditional neighborhood. And so the goal is always to mix some level of incomes. So as we've indicated, we're going to have about 20% of the units will have no rental assistance, and of those, 10% will be straight market rate units. The other 10 will have a restriction under the tax credits at 60% of the area median income, and that actually is pretty equivalent to what some of the market rate rents are in this area. And then the remaining units, 80% of them, with a large portion of those being for our seniors, will have the rental assistance available to them.
Ms. Mathews, that seems like a very appealing model to you. Why is that appealing? And I do want to say this as you answer that question. You have worked with at several housing authorities across the country, and you follow the trends in terms of where the housing authorities or where affordable housing trends are going. So why is this one so appealing to you?
Yeah, so there are several things that makes mixed income communities very appealing. For one, it creates a better quality of life for our residents, and so the communities are intentionally diverse, and so individuals can experience, that diversity, which is so important. The second thing is when we are garnering resources to fund developments like this, it's important that we have a source of public and private capital. It makes the deal easier to finance.
Sure.
And so by having public and private capital, we're able to garnish, those resources and build these units.
Sounds like it would be a very appealing development just for people in general, right? When they're looking for a nice community to move into. Um, I mean, it just sounds like it would be very appealing, to someone who's looking for a place. Um, Let me ask about, Dean also has a question about some of the previous drawings had small businesses on Forest Drive. What will we do about traffic collecting around the site, if in fact we have small businesses in connection with the project?
We do not have any mixed use here. This is all a residential development. We do not have any commercial development. On the other side of Ontario Street, and then obviously up and down Forest Drive, you have a lot of commercial development. And when we conducted market studies for the development, we really indicated that there was sufficient commercial space available in the area, that there really was not a sufficient demand to put any commercial space on this site. And again, our goal is to replace the loss of affordable housing. And so we wanted to maximize the number of units that we could put on the site from a residential standpoint.
Okay. Kendra wants to know how much of it is going to be dedicated to the University of South Carolina students.
There will be no student housing. As we indicated in the presentation, the primary or one of the major funding sources will be low-income housing tax credit. The low-income housing tax credit program does not allow for any students to reside in low-income housing tax credit units. So there's no student housing.
Okay, I've got a couple questions here along those same lines. Willa Martin Bailey, with all these parking lots, I can imagine young people on carts with loud music.
That's really an issue of management. We will have third-party private property management. A professional property management firm with extensive experience will be managing the property. And so lease enforcement is very critical and very key. And so we will be, working with the community and the residents to be respectful of each other and to respect the peaceful enjoyment of all of their neighbors. And so that's something that we will do as part of the ongoing operating process.
Okay, and let's see. Haven't heard anything about security and crime prevention. McDuffie residents already have had problems. So that sounds like a question from the neighborhood. Now, I know that there have been a number of meetings with the neighborhood to try to work with the neighborhood. So in terms of crime and security and that kind of thing, do you want that to fall under the same answer that we gave a moment ago? Because some things fit under the jurisdiction of the Columbia Police Department and not necessarily Columbia Housing.
Yeah, we, just the same answer that Cindi just provided a few minutes ago, but I'd also like to add that we are, anytime we, any of our existing developments, as well as any developments that we build in the city of Columbia, we are making a very concerted effort to be good neighbors. And being good neighbors is a part of the excellent property management services that we will provide in being good neighbors. But also, we work very closely, working very closely with the police department, with the sheriff department, and creating just a sense of, neighborhood policing and community policing, not just focus solely on criminal activity, but just being, just being good
Sure.
neighbors. And so those are things that we're working on. We have some dedicated staff that are working in our security department. And so they are actively involved in those initiatives and just being very proactive so that we can continue to be good neighbors.
Well, I tell you, Jeffrey's wondering if citizens, Cindy, can purchase homes there.
Initially, the homes will not be for purchase. They will be rental for 15 years, but we are building to standards that will allow us to be able to sell the units at the end of the 15-year period. That 15-year period is driven by the tax credit program. It has a tax credit compliance period in which the units must remain rental for that initial period. After that, we would love to see some of these units be converted to home ownership units down the road, and we are going to assure that we build to the standards that will allow us to be able to convert to home ownership at the end of the compliance period.
Mr. Bailey is asking about the alley on McDuffie and wanting to know if it's going to be a part of the city's infrastructure, and he seems to say that there's some problems with the way that alley is built.
Yes, that alley is currently a temporary lane that services the backside of the single-family homes. That will be part of overall infrastructure once all of the streets are put into the new development.
Okay, all right. Also, yeah, Ed Bailey was also mentioning, too, that he's hoping that Columbia Police Department, gets involved with policing the area. Crime is something that all citizens are concerned about. And so shouts out to our Columbia Police Department and the partner that they are to us in helping us to try to do our own due diligence. If you all want to add anything, you can. Chase from Facebook, okay, we asked that question about when it's going to be repaired. Do we have any idea about the repairs to the alley on McDuffie?
No, that actually is city infrastructure at this time, and we've been strongly encouraging all neighborhood residents to communicate with the city as well as with us as we move forward with that infrastructure and begin development at the site later this year.
Here's a question from Rebecca from the state newspaper. She's asking about property management company that we might be working with, and if there's an oversight plan for renters with grievances.
We currently have not identified the property management company. That's a process that still will occur in the future as we move forward. We're a good ways away from property management yet. But yes, all residents have a process for grievances. If you're in the rental assistance program, there's a specific outline of a grievance procedure that's basically dictated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And if you're a market rate tenant, you're protected under state tenant landlord laws and have the ability to take your grievances through the housing court system.
Mrs. Mathews, a part of what you were talking about toward the end of the presentation had to do with ways that small businesses can participate in the construction, the building of, and all of that, the whole redevelopment project. Do you want to highlight some of those things?
Certainly. The Housing Authority has set aside a goal, a minimum requirement of 30% participation for minority businesses, women-owned businesses, and small business enterprises. And so when we reach the stage of getting ready to construct the site, we'll begin to have more meetings with all of those entities to talk about how they can get involved and what opportunities that might be available for those entities. And so I'll ask Cindi to add some additional
Yeah, we're very excited about the economic opportunities that we will have available for, as Ms. Mathews said, for women, minority, and small business enterprises. That equivalates to about $12.8 million, 30% of the overall hard construction cost that will be set aside for those enterprises. We will be conducting in the next few months a workshop so that everybody will have an opportunity to understand.
A workshop for MBEs?
Yes, and a workshop for WM and SBEs that will basically provide more information on how firms can participate, how they can submit bids and proposals to the general contractor as we move forward.
Okay. Got a couple additional questions. This is from a homeowner that's there. And he says, as a homeowner on McDuffie, he says that they were promised no more than 30% of housing on the site would be subsidized, and that we are actually breaking an agreement. Can we talk about the purpose of the project and the purpose of our role as Columbia Housing and affordable housing providers?
Yes, the role of the Housing Authority is to assure that we have affordable housing for the low and moderate income households in our community. We are not a private developer. We do not do luxury housing. There's been a lot of wonderful luxury developments throughout the city. There's a lot of strong private developers that are doing that type of development, and the Housing Authority's mission is to provide affordable housing for our community, and that will always be our role. I'm not aware of any agreement with the community. I know there were discussions in the past at various levels.
With other administrations?
Yes, that's correct. We've been told that by the neighbors and by the neighborhood, and we have again tried to stress to them that, you know, our role as the Housing Authority and our mission is to assure that there is affordable housing, and that there are a lot of strong developers throughout the community that have developed, you know, other types of market rate housing, mixed use, upscale, you know, all types of development that you see throughout the community. And it's been very strong and very successful. And our role will be to continue to achieve affordable housing for our residents.
I also like to add too, I think it's, you know, it's so important, you know, everything that we do, we're going to be tremendously transparent about. And, you know, and our transparency comes in the form of having, you know, these types of public meetings, and also making sure that if there are any agreements with any neighbors or any associations, that we put that information out there on our website, that it's made available for public comment, that people can understand exactly what the relationships are between entities and the development of a particular property. It's super important, and we understand that it sometimes can get really frustrating when there's misinformation.
Sure.
And so we want to just make sure that people know that we're going to continue to be as transparent, you know, as we can possibly be.
This is also a good time to thank each and every one of you for continuing to stick and stay with us. We had some internet issues earlier in our broadcast, and we had to start it again, and you guys stuck and stayed with us. We just want you to know how much we appreciate it. I'm looking at the numbers, and our numbers, Mrs. Mathews, are rivaling before we even went off the air. So I'm really glad that people and the interest is still there for the things that we're doing. I want to ask the two of you, how have you been able to keep things on track in the middle of a pandemic?
Well, you know, well, through good technology. Yeah, so we, you know, even though, you know, there has been a lot that the pandemic has cost us, we are really out of the box thinkers, and we immediately, the team just thought about ways that we can continue to do our work. We realize that the work we do is so important to this community, and making sure that people have good quality affordable housing. We cannot allow the pandemic to stop that kind of work. Mm-hmm. And so it just caused us to do business a different way. Mm-hmm. And so, but we're going to continue to move this train along.
Mm-hmm. You know, Cindi, people in the affordable housing circles call you the affordable housing guru. You know that, right? So you know that, right?
Thank you.
That's right. Like Mrs. Mathews, you too have worked in other parts of the country, and you recognize the trends, and you try to, I mean, just from my observation, you know, you try to keep us on top of where the trends are going so that we can maximize the available resources to provide the best possible units that we can. Talk to us about timeline for this project.
We're moving forward quickly. As you noticed on the timeline, one of the things I talked about in the presentation is that the Columbia Housing will actually be issuing the bonds. Typically, the state issues bonds, but they've actually had a hold on their bond program right now. So we've gone to the Housing Authority Board, the Columbia Housing Board, and provided them with the advantages of us being able to issue the bond so it doesn't delay the project. And as I had also mentioned in the presentation, we're very, very excited about the new tool that's available in the state of South Carolina.
Yeah, you seem to be really excited about that.
Yes, I'm very excited about it.
I can tell.
There are not a lot of states that have a state tax credit, so it's very progressive for our legislature, and thank you, representatives. We really appreciate your passing the state tax credit. When we do affordable housing development using bonds and 4% credits, there's always a little bit of gap in financing. And so the state credit is really going to help fill that gap and be able to help further the development of affordable housing throughout our state. And so it's new in the state. We've got investors coming in for the first time, learning how to use the state credit, and we're very excited about it. And so that is a new tool in South Carolina. Our neighbor Georgia has a state credit, but not very many states do have a state credit. So we're very excited to have that available as a new tool to use, and are looking forward to it. That's going to help with our financing. Sometimes the projects get delayed in trying to find what's called the soft or the secondary financing. This will certainly help fill that gap, which will enable us to move our timeline along. So we're pretty excited about continuing, and being able to bring this project to closure, and be able to start some construction early in 2021. The pandemic has slowed us down just slightly, although not significantly. We've continued to have our development team meeting virtually, through technology, and continuing to do the things that we need to do. We've participated in zoning meetings and planning meetings with the city, also virtually. The city's done a great job in bringing those meetings and continuing those meetings so that we can move forward as well. So keeping our fingers crossed, everything is going to fall into place, and we're going to keep pushing the project, and we're looking forward to being able to see some construction underway at the Gonzales Gardens or the Oaks at St. Anna's site. By this time next year, we should have some significant construction underway.
Talk to us about total number of units, and if you could, Cindi, break down the different types of developments that we're talking about, because we're talking about a few different developments.
Yes.
And if you can talk to us about the chronology of each of those.
Yeah, there's two components. The senior component, which will serve households 62 and older.
Okay.
And that's a 3-story building, and it will be 95 one-bedroom apartments with amenity space, as we had detailed in the presentation. And then the other component is the townhome component. They will be under construction simultaneously. There's some economies of scale when we can build those two components together. So we plan to do that. So both components will be under construction simultaneously. We anticipate that the senior building will finish and some of the townhomes. The townhomes will come on board for occupancy in a phased construction. Some will be ready before others, and so we'll begin the occupancy. But the senior building should come on board about the same time as some of the first townhome buildings.
Oh, wow. Now, just the layout and the floor plans of the townhome buildings are very exciting. Can you talk about those a little? And I want to remind people, go to our website, columbiahousingsc.org/Gonzales-Gardens, and you'll be able to get this presentation and see all the detail that Cindy's talking about. Go ahead, Cindi.
Well, one of the trends we've seen in affordable housing in recent years has been that we really have more demand for smaller families. At one time, the old public housing built in the 1930s and 40s had many 4- and 5-bedroom units.
But I hear you, it's hard to find a 1-bedroom unit anywhere in town.
Right.
On any level.
Right. And so our real demand is for 2-bedroom units. That's our biggest demand. And then 3 bedrooms obviously being our second demand. And so we've designed all of the townhomes to serve of those demands, which are the 2 and 3 bedrooms. We will also have 5% of the units will be fully accessible,
Okay.
so that they will meet all of the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA requirements, so that anybody with accessibility needs will be able to address that as well. And then we'll have a variety of designs. There'll be some that are living room, dining room downstairs with bedrooms upstairs. Some will be on one level with another unit above it. So we'll have a variety of designs that we'll be able to offer to the various residents. And as we mentioned, each one will have a defensible space, both in the front yard and the backyard. So you'll be able to define your space as well.
Now, the total number, Mrs. Mathews and Cindi, of senior housing, a number of people are asking of all of what we're doing, what's the total number of subsidized homes? How many of them are for senior housing?
95 units will be for seniors, and then the remaining units will be for families.
Okay. Okay.
190 units are for families.
You know, Mrs. Mathews, there are a number of people who have reached out to me to tell me that Gonzales Gardens was their home, and that there are a number of people that have such fond memories of it. Some of my friends reached out to me just recently to say, hey, I grew up there, and it was just such a wonderful foundation for me. Do you hear that often from people in our public housing communities about what a sense of community they actually provided for them?
Absolutely. I hear it all the time. I hear it sometimes in, even when I'm not actually at work, but when I'm out in the community, people share to me, former residents share to me what a sense of community that it meant. And I enjoy hearing those stories, and I encourage them to bring those stories to us. We're certainly capturing all of that information. We've captured quite a bit of historical information on our website, but we are certainly looking forward at capturing more. We think it's super important for us to have a place to have that history, so that we could share it with folk in the future.
Sure.
And the same sense of community that it meant to people who lived there years ago, we want to make sure that it is an opportunity to create that same sense of community for new people who are going to be moving into the new community.
Dean also wants to know, guys, what's the difference, Cindi, between what was there before and what's coming now?
Okay, what was there before was what is referred to as the traditional public housing program. And it was built in as we mentioned, in 1940. So it was a very different structure and different type of structure. It also, as I mentioned, was traditional public housing, and so you were limited to individuals below 50% of AMI that could reside there. This is going to have some more variety of income levels that will be able to reside there with the market rate units. It also will function on more of a traditional real estate concept, in that there'll be market rents. Some of it will be have rental assistance so that the tenants will be able to pay based on their income, but the development will have market rents. It will be standard real estate in the sense that it will have a debt service with a mortgage, and so it will have to be maintained to make sure that it can support and pay that mortgage. So it functions much more like traditional real estate than what the old traditional public housing used to do.
Okay. Questions about whether or not we would be able to get a Comet bus stop near the new development. It's kind of needed,
Yes.
What
Absolutely.
you gonna do about that, Ms. Mathews?
Yes, Comet, we need you. We need you, Comet. Well, Comet is certainly one of our partners.
That's right.
They've been an amazing partner to the Housing Authority
That's
for many
right.
years, and so we are certainly working on that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That seems like that would add to the quality of life of that area. And it's a beautiful area. I'm excited about the whole community blend and things like that. Ladies, there is some disgruntled sentiment on our thread about people who think that they were promised things before that aren't being met. And I know that we have indicated to them in meetings before and also on this call that we're not able to see anything in writing from anywhere about any previous agreements. And I know that you all are willing to meet and continue to meet offline with people about those things, but I didn't want to not address it since it is so prominent on the call.
Yeah, absolutely. If there are any, questions that you feel you need additional information on, please feel free to reach out to us. My team and I have held individual meetings, group meetings, community meetings, and we will certainly, facilitate those meetings now through Zoom. But just please feel free, to let us know. We've had a lot of meetings prior to COVID-19, a lot of face-to-face meetings with the Lion Street Neighborhood Association. And so we will, certainly want to continue those
Sure.
meetings as well. But we want to hear your feedback, and we will address any, concerns that we receive. Cindy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, we have heard people loud and clear. We understand that there are people who want to see different things developed on the site. And again, I think that what we've tried to stress and be very transparent is the fact that our mission and our goal and our mandate is to provide affordable housing. And so we have to continue down the road of providing affordable housing. As we indicated, we have done a mixture of some market rate housing and some non-subsidized housing in the community. That has been in direct response to the feedback that we've received. We've had several people indicate they would like to have seen all home ownership there. That's really not what we do. Our goal is that when long-term affordable hard units are lost in the community, we really have a mandate to replace those and make sure that we can continue to provide affordable housing to the residents of this community over the long term. That's really the purpose of Columbia Housing.
Dean is asking what percentage of this development is going to be owner occupied. Didn't you say earlier there is no owner occupied?
Yeah, initially there will not be any owner occupancy, okay? It will be a rental community. We are building to the standards that will allow us to be able to sell the units at the end of the 15-year tax credit compliance period.
I think we probably have time for maybe five more minutes of questions, and I also want to give you all an opportunity in that same period of time to do any wrap up that you have. But I do have just a couple more questions from listeners. Ed on Facebook says they want a wall dividing the homes from the renters. Is that something that you're willing to consider?
I think it's really so important that we as a community engage the concept around mixed income communities. Inclusion, that we be very intentional and very strategic about making sure that the families we serve are included in the neighborhood, that they are considered an integral part of the neighborhood association.
Why is that
that
so
they
important
are,
to you, Ms. Mathews?
It's so important because our families, just because your economic situation might be different, doesn't mean that people
wouldn't be a
should
good
treat you
neighbor.
different
That's
and
right.
that you wouldn't be a good neighbor.
Right.
We have a lot of good people
That's right.
that we serve.
That's right.
And we are going to be good neighbors. And so being very intentional about inclusion and diversity is super important to us. And I can't stress that, enough. And I think that building walls, it says a lot to people that we serve. It says that we don't want you in our neighborhood. It symbolizes a sense of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. And so I don't want us to, as a community,
Go down
to
that
create
path.
and go down that path.
I get you. You have anything you want to add to that, Ms. Herrera? She kind of laid it out, though.
Right.
Yes,
I did.
I think that's exactly our sentiment. I think what we do want to do at the same time, however, is respect the homeowner's property rights. Yes. And so I think that as we continue to finalize the designs and as we begin construction, we want to assure that the lane that services their driveways and their backyards, which has been a great area of concern, we want to assure that we create a privacy there, an ability to be able to, for them to be able to access that lane and assure that it's not going to be blocked by parking from guests or visitors. So we are working in the design to assure that we can protect their privacy.
That's important.
Because they have property rights. As homeowners,
right.
they have their property rights, and we clearly understand that. So we want to assure them that we're going to do everything possible in the design to be able to assure that they can still access that lane, that it won't be used as parking to block their way or their driveways. And so we will work with that. But building a wall is not the answer or the solution. There's other ways that we can address their concerns.
David wants to know, are there measures to prevent redlining? I think we've been down that path and we took care of that. But do you want to address it?
I think we've addressed as much as we can at this point in time. It's our intent to be very inclusive, to assure that everybody can be included and be part of the community. I know as we've worked with the Lion Street Neighborhood Association,
Yes.
one of their big concerns is stability. They want to see people, be stable in the community. And so I think we want to be a good neighbor. We want to work with them both on, improving the recreational facilities for the larger community, the community center. We want to be a neighbor. We want to be part of the community and be able to have our residents be a part of that community as well. And make sure that if we reach a point when we do get to the point where we can convert this to homeownership, we would work very closely to make sure there would be no redlining.
Okay. I do have one last question. It's about the MBE process and program. Who's monitoring it? How do I get in touch with anybody to find out when the workshop is going to be? Do you really mean $12.8 million is actually going to be available for small women and minority businesses, that kind of talk?
The 30% of hard construction is the $12.8 million. That is a requirement for the general contractor to meet that goal. I think what's important to remember is that this is a construction job in which we have to have the best qualified firms that can do the work. They have to be licensed, they have to be bonded, they have to be able to meet the requirements in order to provide us with good construction. We want to make sure the property is going to be built well, but there will be lots of opportunities for us to work with firms to help them reach those goals. We will be conducting the workshop. It will be publicly advertised everywhere. When the workshop is held, we anticipate that it won't be until sometime probably late summer, early fall, before that workshop is held. So we just recommend that everybody stay attuned to our website because that's where all the information will be placed. And so please stay in touch with our website and sign up for contacts to make sure that you get any information that's posted there. And Cynthia, you can tell them more than I can about the website.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's chocked with great stuff. Mrs. Mathews, did you have anything to add to that? And somebody's asking, will we be implementing curfews for renters? I'm sorry to laugh.
Do we have jurisdiction over curfews?
Yeah.
I think that's
let me just
out of our
remind everybody
jurisdiction.
that this community will be citizens of the city of Columbia.
Yes.
And they will have the same benefits, rights,
so funny.
and as any citizen of Columbia. So they will be expected to abide by as the same as any other citizen in our community.
This is a very exciting project for the city of Columbia and for just for affordable housing in general. Now's probably a good time for our closing comments. Ms. Mathews, do you have anything that you want to say on anything else before your close?
I know.
Okay. Well, Cindi, if you go ahead and give me your closing comments, and then Ms. Mathews will close us out.
Yeah, we'd just like to ask that everybody work with us. We are trying to be as transparent as possible. We are being transparent. We want to hear feedback. If you have other comments and other feedback after our session, we're very happy to hear from you. And feel free to contact us at any time, and we'll be happy to respond. May not always give you the answer you want to hear, but we will give you the factual response.
Mrs. Mathews, your close.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank you again for taking time to be with us today. We're going to be doing more of these conversations. So, not just on housing, but other types of programs and initiatives that we offer here, from the Housing Authority. And so we invite you back to engage with us. As mentioned earlier, please continue to follow us on our social media platforms and on our website, and we will be updating information to make sure that you are aware of any opportunity to engage with us.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Mathews. Thank you, Ms. Herrera. And I want to thank each and every one of you for supporting our broadcast tonight. It's important for us to be able to bring you this information as we want to be as transparent as possible to let you know the moves that Columbia Housing is making. I've been your host tonight, but I'm also the Senior Vice President here of Communications and delighted to be in this role. So on behalf of our Board of Commissioners, our two presenters, Cindi Herrera, our Senior Vice President responsible for development, and our CEO, which is our Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director Ivory Mathews. We want to say a very special thank you and good night. And remember, you can always go to our Facebook page and replay this. For folks who didn't get a chance to see it, you can go to our website, columbiahousingsc.org/Gonzales-Gardens to be able to get this presentation. We thank you for your time tonight. And until next time, good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.